Hello world. Welcome to Beta Asset Financial, a channel designed by a data finance nerd who recently just got back into MTG. So I'm excited to demo this idea that I've been mulling over in the past few months because it's the perfect intersection between what I love to do in my day job and over what I've recently become super intrigued by. I think for maybe the third or fourth time in my life. And so a little context for you. A few months ago, I caught wind that this big Magic the Gathering event, the GP, was coming into town, and it was over the Christmas holidays. And so I went, and I was just amazed at how fast and how much the game had evolved since the last time I sort of was ever involved with the game. Very specifically, I was looking at sheets of cards behind glass cases that had, $1,000+ price tags, and these were the same cards that I had essentially butchered and treated rather recklessly in my early teens. So hindsight's 2020, right? But whatever. Point is I was floored to see that what some of these cards were being priced at, and thought it'd be a cool pet project to start to integrate what I've picked up over the past few years as a day trader, and apply that to the same sort of mechanics, but just over pieces of cardboard with pictures of monsters on them. So, as many of you can likely relate, Magic the Gathering is something that you never truly get out of if ever you get into it. And I guess here I am. Anyways, I wanted to build I've built this tool and wanted to share some of the basic design components and walk you through some of the functionality that I hope will, over time, help me get a better understanding of how much this game has evolved and put prices on that over the past 15 years. And then for you guys, I'm hoping to provide something unique, different, or interesting, and develop a respectful dialogue with you out there that hopefully leads to repurposing or evolving or redesigning and scaling this to ask other interesting questions or generate other insights that might not be immediately obvious. So you'll notice here the scope of what I have in front of you is limited to just the master sets, and there are reasons for that. And over the course of the episodes that follow this one, I'm going to share some insights as to why that is and why the bias for now is going to be limited to this. But the gist of it is that when I first started kind of re-piquing my interest in this whole thing, UMA was the thing that everyone was talking about. The cards in the set were just absolutely monstrous, and unboxing videos were all over the place. And even at the GP, there was so much appetite for some of the top tier cards in that set, so much so that they were adding like a 25% trade bonus to specific cards in that set. So I thought this would be a really good way to just narrow the focus of being able to reintroduce the concepts of the cards and the underlying mechanics of the game. And it just, this product is, it's one of the premium products, so it just makes it a little bit more interesting. But we'll unpack that over the course of the next few weeks. Rather than get into my collection goals now, I think we can just start to jump into some of the core functions and insights on how this thing is built. So on the top here, you'll notice that we've got a few key calculations, and any dashboard really should start and lead with that. When it comes to Magic the Gathering and monitoring the value of cards over any defined period of time, the real number we're looking for is contingent on just being able to calculate the value of the underlying cards. And so here we've got the sum of all of the cards in all 7 of the master sets, the foil and non-foil version. And for good measure, and as a good comparator, we also include the value of the set as of a week before. So as of the close of Friday, March 1st, the value of the underlying cards is about $17,000, and a week before is about $200 less than that. This number is essentially the set value at a given time less the value of the set a week ago. and this is just the percentage change over that time frame. So these are really the core numbers that we're looking to unpack and sort of dissect. And by dissect, I mean, well, let me just draw your attention to sort of this middle section here, which describes some of the dimensions that we're interested in looking at this information. And so, you know, it's one thing to know that what the value of these sets are in aggregate, but it's another to be able to start to look at just the rares or the mythics in that set. And so what this is saying is the underlying value of the rares in the 7 master sets. There are 742 cards. The value of those cards is about $7.2 thousand, which makes up about 21% of the overall value. Wait, that's not right. Sorry. Yeah, okay. So 742 cards are 21% of the current inventory of all the cards, which is less interesting. But I think the key takeaway here is being able to place a visual on the rares and the mythics in the set. What this is describing is that we've got more rares in the set that are worth, you know, $7,000, and fewer mythics in that set, which makes sense. So you have fewer mythics in general, but those mythics, the value of those mythics are generally higher. So, you know, intuitively that makes sense. The average price of a mythic is generally higher than the average price of a rare. And the uncommon and common slots kind of describe the same thing, where you've got a ton of uncommons and a ton of commons in any given set, and they generally, the thinness of this bar describes how thin the value is, I guess, for lack of a better term, as a contributing factor to the $17,000. In fact, if I was just interested in looking at the rares, what I could do is click that, isolate for the 750 rares in all 7 sets. It'll give me the value as of last week, the dollar change and so forth. You know, we can relax that and look at maybe the 2 categories of cards. And so, you know, this just sort of demonstrates some of the more basic functionality of what you're seeing in front of you. We have the same, we reserve the same ability on the dimension of color. So similar to the layout here, it's describing the same thing. You know, what this is saying is that generally speaking, if you notice that the length of the radius here is essentially equal, and what that's saying is that in any given set there's generally an equal distribution of, you know, green, I don't know why that's not green, but green, blue, black, red, white, gold, multicolored cards. So that makes sense, but what's interesting to know is that the thickness of this bar describes the value that it contributes to this total value here. So generally speaking, cards that are colorless have a higher value, and then contribute a higher portion, so 5,000 of this 17,000 will come in form of colorless cards, and the colorless cards here are essentially all the lands and artifacts that come in the set. And that makes sense too when you think about all of the sort of heavy hitting lands that come in some of the master sets, right? So yeah, this is just describing some of the basic functionality, how we want to slice and dice the information. We reserve the ability to do that here as well by set. And so what you're seeing here is, you know, the week over week percentage change by set, distinguished by foil and non-foil. If I wanted to look at it in terms of the dollar values, so this $229 is essentially the sum of all of this. So over the week, the sets decreased or increased by value of 229, and these are the contributing factors. It looks like UMA, the foil set, you know, decreased the most by nominal dollar value, and the same thing goes with percentage-wise. So, you know, this hopefully sparks your interest and starts to get you thinking about how we can look at this information a little bit more critically. Final thoughts on the bottom, what you're seeing at the bottom. So these scatter plots are some of my favorite visuals ever to incorporate in any dashboard, and it's essentially a great tool if you're trying to measure one data point over over two dimensions of numbers, which is really just a fancy way of saying if I want to know which cards, for instance, moved the highest by percentage and by dollar. I have that ability here. So if I blow this up over the course of this week, what we're seeing is a really big change in this card. So this card increased by $35, which is 53%. A 53% increase over that week. Same thing here. Another $35 increase in Misty Rainforest and MM3, the foil version, that went up by $35. And so what you're seeing is percentage change, dollar change, and you see an outlier here where this thing went up 516%, so this thing skyrocketed. And this would be a good point where we'd want to maybe take this and isolate and sort of question what's happening here. Is this anomalous, and all these kinds of things. I've done the same thing here with, this is data, I'll get to this, but what you're seeing here is the same thing, but just on the negative side. So, which cards moved in this week by order of magnitude, by percentage and dollar value. And, in tandem, this can describe things that you may want to sell and offload, and these can be interpreted as cards that you might want to consider picking up because, they've gotten cheaper. You'll see these two dots here, which describe some of the challenges with integrating all of this information. So the ice card in UMA it's that split fire ice card, and it just describes a data challenge here because depending on where you pull this information, sometimes the card will be called ice, sometimes it'll be called fire, sometimes it'll be called both. And so from a data modeling standpoint, that's something that I need to iron out and figure out a solution to. But we can just hide that by just filtering out all the rares and mythics for now. And I think these are the cards that people are generally more interested in anyway. So, so that describes some of the core functionality. I think I'm gonna put a pause on this because there's just like a lot to cover, and rather than get into the specifics of like individual cards, I'll reserve that for another time after I've figured out how to deal with some of the problems that I've been facing when trying to update this with new prices. So rather than digging through, I thought this would be a good place to stop. One of the key steps is figuring out how much time it's going to take to update the pricing at each interval, and then figuring out budgeting for time to troubleshoot and iron out the wrinkles, some of the wrinkles that I just mentioned. But yeah, I think for now, all of these ideas are starting to kind of compound, and I think there's going to be a lot of stuff that can come out of this core body of work. And so it was clear that rather than try to build all of this stuff poorly, I'd rather just focus on one thing and sort of build it out slowly. So leave me a message, tell me what you think, if there's anything here that you think would be really interesting to isolate for. And thank you for visiting my channel and watching what is likely the first video I've posted on Beta AF. So on that note, happy hunting. See ya.